Well, welcome everyone. My name is Leslie Thompson. I'm Director of Adult Programs here at the Sid Richardson Museum. And I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's lecture. Before I introduce our guest speaker for tonight's program, I first want to respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who've lived on this land since time immemorial. And I especially want to acknowledge and pay respect to the Wichita and affiliated tribes, which include the Waco, Kachai, Taukoni, and Tauvea, upon whose historical homeland I'm conducting this evening's program. And while I recognize that a simple statement is insufficient to support the rights and well-beings of Indigenous people, I like to use this land acknowledgement to serve as a reminder to continue to educate myself and others on the past and present histories of Native communities, both in North Texas and beyond, like those represented in our collection. And it's our collection that is largely makes up the current exhibits that we have in our galleries, called Charles M. Russell Storyteller Across Media, which focuses on all different art forms through which the artist communicated his stories in his work. And one of the common narratives in Russell's art is that of the relationship between the Indigenous people of the Great Plains and the American bison. And what does that relationship look like today? So for this lecture, Lucille Contreras, enrolled member of the Lipan Apache Band of Texas, will talk about the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, which is working to honor their ancestors and inspire a reclamation of Lipan Apache language, traditional food, and other cultural practices through restoration of their relatives, the buffalo, on their homelands in South Central Texas. Lucille Contreras is a CEO and founder of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, having helped raise buffalo on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. She was inspired to establish a Lipan Buffalo Ranch here in Texas. Lucille earned her BFA at Colorado University Boulder and has spent much of her career in the world of information technology and is transitioning into the world of regenerative agricultural systems. Today, Lucille works on a ranch obtained by the USDA Farm Service Agency, beginning farmer and rancher loan program, and is focused on restoring the traditional relationship between the Lipan Apache and the American bison. And we are delighted to have her here with us this evening. So with that, please join me in welcoming Lucille Contreras.
Miss Leslie, thank you so much. Dazo, good evening, everybody. My name is Lucille Contreras. My father was Joe Contreras, Lipan Apache. He was born in Laredo, Texas. His parents were born in Coahuila, Mexico. On my mother's side, Alice Contreras was a Mexica. And on my mom's side, we come from the state of Jalisco, Mexico. So way beyond the borders of land, and thinking about the movement of people up and down the land. And so I'm a product of people that have for generations moved across the land. And as Ms. Leslie said, I'm the CEO and founder of Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. I started Texas Tribal Buffalo Project approximately 3 years ago. And it was during that time that I was really aching to come back home to this land, to our lands here in Texas. And this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, where our lives were changed all across the world. And I was dreaming and hoping and praying for a way to come back home. And I thought of, I had a vision, and it's not this knockdown, you're going to see stars in the sky type of vision, but it was more like a feeling. And this feeling definitely comes from our ancestors and the movement of our ancestors and the experiences of our ancestors. In this slide here, this woman, her name is Mary Richardson. She is a Lipan Apache woman that intermarried into the Tonkawa tribe. The Tonkawa also lived in this area and were relocated, forcibly moved to Oklahoma. And so we also, as Lipan Apache people, have relatives that today live in Oklahoma, New Mexico, Louisiana, and California, and all over the state of Texas. Really, we are a wide diaspora. This map here is from a website that is called native-land.ca. And if you ever are curious about the tribes that lived on the land that maybe you are living on, you can look on this website. You have to really look at this website critically. And I know it might be a little bit hard to see, but here in this area right here is Dallas and the Wichita overlaying with the Tonkawa. These are some of the treaties that happened. And the Humano were also in this area. As if you were to go to this website, you could literally put in your address and you could find out what tribes lived in that area. A lot of people are using this website for land acknowledgement, but I do want to encourage everybody to do due diligence because it's not 100% accurate. This website was founded, and great job that they are doing. It was founded in Canada. And so researchers from Canada going across Turtle Island, across the land to document the different tribes. When I first looked at this site a few years ago, it had Lipan Apache in one very small dot more closer to the border, which is inaccurate totally. And I have data to prove that. So I submitted the data I have, which are historical maps, which are out there you can find, as well as treaties that showed the migration and the movement of Lipan Apache all throughout the state of Texas. And so to this day, if I were to zoom out on this map, you could see the Lipan all throughout the state. And so everything that we know today, we are still refining and rediscovering. I originally come from San Antonio, Texas. I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. I was born in 1967, and I'm really happy and grateful to be here today. Before I go any further, I just want to take a moment and pause. I have a dear friend who is Oglala Lakota, and she is currently in the hospital right now. Her name is Dawn Decora, and she is a very amazing warrior woman. And I just want to remember her, and I want to offer this presentation in Dawn's in honor of Dawn. As we all know, tomorrow is never promised, and each and every one of us, I'm very grateful to be here with each and every one of you today in this moment and in this time. And so I'm from San Antonio. I grew up in San Antonio during the time where, you know, you've seen the meme where Kids played outside until the light went out, and then you knew when to go inside, and we actually played with each other in person. And that's the childhood I had, you know, great childhood, riding my bike around the city until it became too dangerous to do that. And until it became too dangerous to be outside alone after dark. And, you know, I really want to continue prayers for all of the youth of today, for all the challenges that they face that a lot of us didn't face. And just, you know, the challenges they face will make them stronger if we don't give up on them and keep having patience and encouraging the youth to find out who they are, each and every one of us. I truly believe that what we know about our families and where we come from makes us stronger. So when I came across this postcard, I believe it's a 1920s postcard from San Antonio, Texas, Brackenridge Park, which is smack dab right in the middle of the city. And to know that there were buffalo there, they were being kept there, but historically, that is the range right straight through this area where we're at, down, keep on going south into San Antonio and into northern Mexico. And part of this movement, part of this migration that the buffalo make, my people, the Lipan Apache and other Apache groups and other native tribes that depended wholly on the buffalo, are part of what we call as the Buffalo Nation. We are Buffalo people. Lipan Apache are the most southernmost Buffalo Nation people. But I had to go all the way up north to South Dakota to reconnect with the buffalo as relatives. So it was in about 2016 that I was living at the time in Boulder, Colorado, and I moved to Porcupine, South Dakota. I had the opportunity to work with buffalo. I had the opportunity to learn how to caretake for buffalo from the Oglala Lakota, specifically Knife Chief Buffalo Nation Society. They are a nonprofit in Porcupine, South Dakota. And I lived and worked with them for about 7 years. And my first opportunity that I had to be with this beautiful sacred relative up close and in person, like you see in this photograph, where sometimes because we work with the buffalo every day and kids don't do this at home because they are wild animals and they are very different from cows. As you may have seen some of the incidents happening at Yellowstone or even at Caprock Canyon here a few months ago. They are wild animals, but as caretakers, we do develop a relationship. Now, I'm not on the ground feeding them, I'm in the vehicle, but still we can develop relationships with these beautiful, beautiful, majestic relatives, where we, as Lipan Apache, from this state of Texas, from this area before it was Texas, before there was borders, everything was centered around the buffalo and our relationship as food, as medicine, as art, as relative, and as spiritual guidance. And I felt that the things that I learned while I was in South Dakota were preparing me to come back home, to our lands here of the Lipan Apache, of the Humano, of the Wichita, of the Tonkawa, but also the Cohuitecano, the Carrizo Come Crudo, the Carancawa, so many tribes that the descendants of these people are still alive today here, living here, walking here amongst each other. What happened in Texas is that once the buffalo started being taken off of this earth so brutally, and I'm sure you all have seen this photograph of this pile of skulls. It's about 30 feet high and hundreds, thousands of skulls. That photograph is so painful for me to see. It is so painful when you think of the destruction of our relatives, and then you think of why was that destruction happening. So when I had the opportunity to live in Lakota land with my Lakota relatives who still strongly retain their culture, their language, their religion, and yes, all Native people all across Turtle Island, which we call this beautiful continent, suffer from diabetes and high blood pressure and cholesterol and depression, I believe is a direct result of the loss of the buffalo on the land. The buffalo are a keystone species. The keystone species, meaning if the keystone species are taken off of the earth, everyone suffers. I had the beautiful opportunity to learn how to reconnect with the horse, to ride with leaders. I rode here, this was the Cheyenne, this was the Oglala Lakota chief from Standing Rock, and we rode together during a Crazy Horse memorial ride that was 5 days long. And I was so happy, my spirit. I thought, why did I have to wait my whole life? So remember, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in the city. My parents, although they are Native, they are Indigenous, they also grew up in the city. And that was a direct result of the loss of land and language. And then fast forward once again to the very beginning of the pandemic, when everything was changing all over the world. And you remember seeing those photographs of the dolphins in the Italian canals, and, you know, animals returning to urban areas. Well, I returned to the garden. And this garden, I was still in Porcupine, South Dakota, I feel saved my life. I experienced what many people experienced at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, is this deep loneliness, this deep depression about being isolated, being alone, and feeling disconnected. And so I put my hands to work in the soil. And for months and months, I toiled in the soil like a full-time job. And it healed my spirit. And I started realizing there is a way that I can come home. There is a way that I can make it back to my ancestral homeland. Me, myself, Lucille Contreras, I am a lineal descendant of people that lived here for generations in this land, traveling along the land, because our people did not live sedentary. Our people were always moving, following the buffalo, following the Oglala Aquifer, which comes all the way down the land as well. The water came down, up and down the land. The animals, the buffalo, the deer, all the vast variety of fruits and vegetables that we harvested that were part of our daily diet. And I had taken in 2018 a class called The Business of Indian Agriculture. And that class taught me the pathway to come home. using agriculture and remembering that we are part of the Buffalo Nation. So the Buffalo relatives in South Dakota, spending time out there, watching them, looking at them, observing them, learning from them, like my ancestors did. And then you see all the snow mustaches on these buffalo? They use their great big heads to move the snow. They use their head to move the snow back and forth to get to the grass. And they survive blizzards below 8, below 9, below 10. How freezing cold it gets in South Dakota and all the other places further up north as well. All the herds, this is how they survive. Cattle, unfortunately, have to have human beings' intervention to survive. People have to go and break the ice and take them hay, and the buffalo survive. And as they have fortitude, they have perseverance, they have strength, and they have unity, which is something that I felt lacking in my life, and wanting to regain that for myself, and remembering some works that I did in Texas in 2006. In 2006, I was part of a reburial that happened near Victoria, Texas, on Dow Chemical grounds. I was part of a NAGPRA reburial of ancient human remains that were 7,000 years old. They were discovered many, many years ago, decades ago. And one of the universities had these remains. There are many remains in the universities in Texas. But our tribe was granted the permission to rebury our ancestors, which we are lineal descendants. This tells us we have always been here for thousands of years. And we are working on some DNA data to prove that, to show that. Not that we have to prove anything to ourselves, but in order to help make changes, data is always necessary and always needed. And so when I think about my own past here in Texas and the work that I have done as a Lipan Apache woman, I knew I had it within me to do the work of our ancestors. This is a chief Costalites. This picture was taken in the early 1900s in Brackettville, Texas, at Fort Clark. This was during some of the time of the Buffalo Soldiers. And the Buffalo Soldiers were used against many of the Apache to push us out of our homeland. The Buffalo Soldiers, being African American descendants of slaves, also being taken out of their homeland. Sometimes we actually cooperated with each other, and there are descendants today that live in Brackettville that are descendants of both the Buffalo Soldiers intermarrying with Lipan Apache families. And so I love this photograph. This Chief Costalites standing here holding his fist up, which is a universal sign of, power to the people, or the people will survive. And how old is this photograph? It just totally reaffirms my projection in life. And then some of the jewelry he's wearing has the symbol of the moon and the sun, which are very significant for Lipan Apache people, as we are people that were guided at night by the stars and guided in the day by the sun. How do you know which is east and west? By where it sets and where it rises. And how do we know where we're going and where we come from? each and every one of us here in this room are people that are descended from people that once lived from the earth, lived from growing our own food, lived from harvesting our own animals and plants. This, by the way, is from a publishment, is it Berdal? Lipan Apache, man and woman, and of course wearing the buffalo robe. So again, coming out of the pandemic, in the pandemic actually, wanting to come home. So using the skills that I had taken in 2018, I decided to submit my USDA beginning farmer and rancher loan. I grew up in the city, but I have always wanted to be out in the land and be out in the country. It was something innate in me, wanting to always be near plants and animals and know more about who we are and where we come from. And so I decided to submit my beginning farmer and rancher loan. Once you submit your beginning farmer and rancher loan, you have a clock that starts ticking. And USDA gives you about 90 days to find a property, make an offer, have it be accepted, and then you wait 7 months for the whole process to go through. So it's really a daunting process because what seller is going to wait 7 months for a closing? So I was very blessed. My mother used to say, "You're not lucky. We're not lucky. We're blessed." And so I just feel I was very blessed that the individual who sold me this property was willing to wait all of that time for us to close. And so my sons got to work building fence. This is my oldest son and my youngest son. These are my children, my daughter, my son-in-law. And this is the property that we live in. It's 77 acres in Gonzales County, which is also smack dab in the middle of our traditional homelands. And one thing that I want to tell and encourage everybody, that if you are looking for a pathway to acquire land, please look at the USDA beginning farmer and rancher loan. You have to have 10 years or less of agriculture experience. I had been working with the buffalo in South Dakota for 7 years, so I fit within that time frame. But I want to tell each and every one of you, if I could do it, you could do it also. The reason being is that USDA provides the entire amount. This property that you see here was, I'm going to just be open and frank, was $577,000. The USDA financed that entire amount. We're at about 3% interest. I make one payment a year because you're in agriculture, and they realize that it takes time for the plants and their animals to grow and for you to be able to work with them. And then you make one yearly payment of about $20,000. It depends on what your loan is. I was single. I had terrible credit. I had no savings. And that's why I say, if I could do it, anybody could do it. I kind of went at it like I have nothing to lose and everything to gain, because I could finally come home. And this is where I live now. And this beautiful property that I live on is right here in this yellow area. DeWitt's part of the DeWitt colony. And this swath right here says immense herds of buffalo. And so, you know, not that I needed this map to prove to me that I knew I was coming home where the buffalo were also living, but once I made the decision to come home, it's like one thing after the other kept presenting to me that, yes, Lucille, you're on the right path. keep going. Like the buffalo, have that fortitude, have that perseverance, have that strength. And it was hard. It was a 7-month process. And every week my loan officer would tell me, oh, sorry, you didn't qualify because this or that. And I would ask why. She would tell me why, and I would scramble to get the data or whatever I needed. And then she'd be like, okay, we can keep going. And that was a 7-month week like that. I was like a yo-yo. I would, but I'm so happy and grateful that we were able to make it home. And another thing that I learned from our Lakota relatives and some of our other relatives here, I'm also, like I mentioned, on my mother's side, we're Mexica or Aztec. And I am an Aztec dancer also for nearly 30 years. And with all of these prayers and with all of this sense of direction from my ancestors, I knew that the first thing that we had to do was give offerings and thanks to our ancestors for allowing us to come home. And the way we did that was doing a buffalo harvest. And so this was before we had any buffalo on our property. And so this is my oldest son here. He actually did the harvest. And these gentlemen here are some Lipan Apache relatives giving my son words of encouragement, words of strength, words of wisdom, apart from mom, apart from everyone else. And this is part of our ways to encourage each other and help each other. And then we harvested this buffalo. And we prayed and we gave thanks to this buffalo for her life. And we put down pollen, we used tobacco, and we sang songs. And this was the first buffalo that we harvested on our land as Lipan Apache people on the homeland of where our ancestors lived. And I got to thinking, you know, we are walking in our ancestors' paths. And this is another painting that I believe it's in San Antonio. I don't know where the original one is, but I think it's at the Texas History Museum or Culture Museum in San Antonio. But this is a Lipan Apache encampment. But what I love about this is that everybody in this picture is doing what they needed to do without being told. As Lipan Apache, as Native people, not necessarily needing a boss to direct you. We all instinctively know what to do, and that is still within us. That is still within our DNA, within our spirit, and within our souls. And instinctively, everybody immediately went to go do the work that needed to be done, whether that be praying, giving blessings, drumming, singing, cleaning the guts and the stomach, skinning the hide. And it was so beautiful. Everybody just went to work without, okay, we'll count 1 through 10 and 1s go through here and 5s go through here. And it just tells me that when we as Native people are given the chance, give our own selves the chance to do the work of our ancestors, we instinctively know what to do and how to do it. On that day, it was in June of 2021, we also gifted all of that meat that was harvested that day to each and every one of the visitors and the relatives that were there. And I had told everybody ahead of time, bring your coolers, and everybody was able to leave with at least 5 pounds of fresh buffalo meat. Different from the way our ancestors would have done it out in the field, and right then and there, everybody take their portion. And what I've learned from some of our elders, and one of them, his name is, he's a Canadian elder, and he started the International Buffalo Treaty. Leroy Little Bear, he said, he's a doctor, Dr. Leroy Little Bear. He said, what we need to do is take our ancestors' teachings and values and traditions and use what we can and what we have today in modern society so that we can continue. We're using our minds and our traditions to keep growing stronger and moving forward. And so here you see a mobile processing unit. And it was beautiful. It was very beautiful. And I had the opportunity to sign the Buffalo Treaty in person at a Greater Yellowstone Coalition last year. And that is recorded and kept in Canada, but it is signed by tribes all over the United States as well as Canada. And let me see if I could play this one real quick. This is my youngest son. His name is Tekwani Maestas, and we are moving the buffalo. So this was still living in Porcupine, South Dakota. These buffalo had gotten out, they had gone about 5 miles away from the pasture where they were supposed to be. But even though they're wild, they're not domesticated, we know how to work with them. There's some guys out there that raise buffalo that are really hooting and screaming and yelling at them and chasing them. But what we try to do is work with them and gently move them. It takes a lot longer, but you're not causing the buffalo to get stressed out. You're not, if we were going to harvest the buffalo, the meat, if you stress out the animal, that's going to come out in the meat. And so my youngest son learned how to walk with the buffalo when we need to move them. Again, I'm still in the vehicle. I'm not that brave yet, but we do. And today, to this day, the buffalo that we caretake for, he works with them in that way as well. So where we live, going back to agriculture, learning about the plants, learning about the soil, learning about the microorganisms that live in the soil, how to learn about the health of the buffalo as it relates to the soil. Right now, this drought has hit us really hard. And I'm just grateful that we still have some green grass out in our pasture, but we are supplementing with hay and range cubes. But with this rain that we had, hopefully it's going to spring right back up. And the good thing about this property is the previous owner had the foresight to plant multiple varieties of grass. So year round, as some grass is going down, other grass is growing up. So not only am I a buffalo farmer, I'm a grass farmer. I want to make sure that we have healthy grass for the buffalo. And as necessary, it is a fact of life. We will eventually have to cull some of these buffalo and work with them, but we do it as respectfully. And yes, they are our relatives. And I've been asked, if they're your relatives, how and why do you eat them? Well, because this is part of who we are as Native people. It is part of our food. It is part of our culture. It is how we are going to sustain ourselves so that we can continue in the future generations. Our ancestors, the buffalo, didn't go through the losses that they went through in vain because their numbers are growing. Just as the indigenous people of Texas are also becoming stronger and more connected to each other as relatives. And so these three things are very much part of the mission and goals of Texas Tribal Buffalo Project and the work that we do. And out of the 20 head that we have today, we've been blessed that most were donated. We've had so much amazing support by other organizations like the Nature Conservancy and Tonka Fund, which gifted us with 5 buffalo last year, which were all pregnant. So we had 2 for 1. And this year we had another great calf crop. And in 2.5 years, we went from 9 bison to 20. And that is a lot of hard work, but caretaking for, like I said, the soil, the grass, the land. And some of the work that we do also is very important and critical for the entire organization are the youth and what they bring to each and every one of us as adults is that we know that we have a legacy. And so we had a youth camp our first year where kids got together and were able to learn how to, some kids didn't know how to fish, and we taught kids how to make fire. And I've got a short little video for you guys.
Tú eres tan sagrada, traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía, a pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra. Respetamos tus ancestros y la familia, tu nombre indígena. Tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive a pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable. Yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus pasos. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz. Sí, no vamos a escondernos más. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz. Sí, no vamos a escondernos más.
They say that history is written by the victors. But how can there be a victor when the war isn't over? The battle has only just begun, and creators descending and staring us for us. And this time, it isn't Indians versus cowboys. This time, it is all the beautiful races of humanity together on the same side, and we are fighting to replace our fear. Love. And this time, bullets, arrows, and cannonballs won't save us. The only weapons that are useful in this battle are the weapons of truth, faith.
And so, and I just want to acknowledge also my good sister, Kelly Reagan, who is here, who she was also an instructor, and her awesome daughter was there, a really cool horsewoman, and my Lipan Apache family. My other sister, Trisha Whitman, is here too to support me, and I'm just really grateful. But so we do our best to help the youth also, to remember that we are relatives. And so some of the things that we're working on in the future are we're developing some curriculum, farm to school. I've onboarded with 2 school districts. Hopefully we'll be supplying meat to these schools so the children have this in their bodies, and working on jobs, as well as we sell buffalo meat as a way to support our nonprofit. So not only are we doing the work, you know, raising the animals, but we also do send some to processing. We attend, these are some of our babies that were born this year, and I thought I'd bring them along. They start, when they're born, they start falling like dominoes. You know, one will be born, and then all of a sudden you've got so many. But I love that when they're sitting in the grass, you can barely see them sometimes. And so just some of the things that we're working towards for next year. And the biggest, most priority is trying to acquire more land for the buffalo, especially. And I want to share with you all, the first time I went out to the buffalo pasture in South Dakota, and we're driving, leaving the pasture, and I look out my window and I thought, oh my God, stop. And I took this picture, and I will always know that we have signs to help us, guide us along in life. So when I saw this picture, I just immediately knew, you know, my world as part of a Indigenous woman was going to be forever tied with the buffalo as a Buffalo Nation. And I'm welcome you all to stay in touch with me. And we have some amazing funders that really help us to get the work done at Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.